Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 3 stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. Before we start that, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. Alright, on to the stories, let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Expensive Support. Dealership pulled bait and switch, it cost them over $50,000. The city I live in has extremely inflated vehicle values compared to the surrounding areas. If you buy the same car from a neighboring state, you can often save $3,000 to $4,000 without really trying. When I buy a new vehicle, which happens every 3 to 4 years, I always look in the surrounding states to compare pricing. This story happened about 5 years ago, and the malicious compliance is still ongoing to this day. I was shopping for a new car, brand new, and found one that matched my specs about 12 hours away in a neighboring state. It was priced about $5,000 below comps. After looking up flights, there was a one-way direct flight that took me to their local airport for around $175. Plus the gas to drive back, I was looking at a total of maybe $275 to save $5,000. Absolutely worth it in this situation. I reached out to the dealership, negotiated a bit, and agreed on a price. I let them know that I would be flying in to pick up the car, and offered to pay in full in advance of the flight. They told me that all they needed was a $1,000 deposit, and that the car was considered mine. We signed a contract and I paid the deposit, and then I booked the flight for 3 days from then. First signs of things gone awry. When I showed up at the airport, the dealership was supposed to pick me up. This had been arranged in advance. A quick phone call later, and I grabbed an Uber to take me the 20 miles to the dealership with the promise of them covering that cost. No big deal either way. Second sign of things gone awry, when I showed up at the dealership, the salesman I had been speaking with asked me if I wanted to walk the lot with him to look at a few cars. Yes, cars, plural. Questioning what he meant by that, we walked into the lot to see these cars that he was talking about. Were these some special type of gold inlaid full self-driving, full self-flying amazemobiles? No, they were not. When I point blank asked to see the car that I was buying, the one with VIN number XYZ listed in this signed contract with a deposit on it, I was told it was no longer available. The salesman offered to show me similar cars, which would have been fine were we able to come to similar terms on pricing. But all of these cars were outrageously priced. Think $2,000 over MSRP instead of $5,000 under MSRP. Important note for later, there was never a mention or any paperwork, signage, etc. of any incentives for giving 5-star reviews. Fast forward 2 to 3 hours. I am now convinced this dealership never had this specific car on the lot and that this was 100% a bait and switch gone wrong. The dealership was unwilling to sell me a similar vehicle at a similar price to our negotiated one. We were over $5,000 apart and were unwilling to pay the flight costs for this bait and switch scenario. A heated discussion ensued between myself and the GM, where he told me to go ahead and leave a bad review, but that I wasn't getting any free money from him. I took an Uber to a nearby hotel and booked a flight back home for the next day. Total cost? Around $750. Cue Malicious Compliance. This dealership had an average Google rating of right around 4.5 stars and around 400 total reviews. Pretty solid for a dealership. That night, while I was sitting in the hotel room, I had some time to burn. I spent a couple of hours creating new email accounts just so that I could leave multiple reviews for this dealership. All said and done, I had left around 20 1-star reviews over the course of that night, and then sort of stopped caring about reviews. At this point, my focus shifted to recovering my lost travel expenses. A few days after getting back, I sent the dealership a demand letter for $750, which they promptly ignored. Since we had done the original contract with the deposit in both states, I was allowed to file a small claim suit in my state, which I did. The dealership never showed up to court, and I received a default judgment for $750. I did collect that, by the way. It took a few certified letters, a few phone calls, and about a year, but I did get a check for $750. As you can imagine, I was still not a happy camper. What they had done was wrong on so many levels. All my friends knew the story of how I was baited and switched, and the fact that I flew to the dealership on a one-way ticket only made it that much worse. They had all left a bad review or two, but nothing more than a normal mad customer. Cue Malicious Compliance long term. I don't know how it started or how it ended up lasting as long as it has, but at some point, I had some time on my hands and left a bad review for this dealership. Just one, not two, not three, one. In doing so, I noticed that all of the reviews I had left right after leaving the dealership were gone. Probably taken down for being fake, or because I had left so many at the same time and the dealership reported them. I wanted to make sure this dealership wouldn't do this to someone else, so the next day I checked to make sure that one bad review I had just left was still there. It was, and since I was thinking about it, I went ahead and created another account and left another 1-star review. Fast forward 2 to 3 years, it has now become a habit. Every time I have a few minutes to spare, I create a new account and leave a 1-star review for this dealership. Their current rating, 1.9 stars with nearly 3,500 total reviews. I am personally responsible for at least half of those reviews. When you open the dealer's website, one of the large banners that flashes across the screen advertises $50 for a 5-star review. Something about showing the review to your salesman to get a $50 Visa gift card. It has been this way since about a year after this bait and switch occurred, right around the time the 1-star reviews began to accumulate. Assuming I am responsible for half of their reviews, and the fact that the dealership only has 3,500 total reviews, they have paid $50 per review for at least 1,000 reviews, likely more than that. Meaning they have implemented a policy to pay for reviews, have spent $50,000 doing so, and have still seen their average rating drop consistently since telling me to go ahead and leave a bad review. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called RDKing647. It says, "You could probably report them to Google. I think paying for 5-star reviews is against their terms of service." Another commenter down below called Retsuko's mom said, "Did you get your $1,000 deposit back too? Maybe I missed it, but I only see the $750 judgment mentioned." OP responded and said, "Yes, I left the deposit with a credit card and it was refunded with no issue." OP, you signed a contract with these people and gave them a deposit for a specific VIN number. I would have a lawyer look over that contract because it seems to me like this would be a little bit more than a small claims issue. Now, I'm in Ontario, Canada, and things might be different here, but I do have a car contract on my desk here right now because I have a new car coming in April. And it says it's for a specific VIN, and there's nothing on there about swapping it out for any other like vehicles. I'm not sure what the statute of limitations is on this, but I'd still have a lawyer look over that contract. This story comes to us from Terioku31. Denied leave on a day with no work, so I'll take them on days I have work. I'm a teacher at a small, new school. We currently have 2 year levels, so our teaching schedules are incredibly light. This means every teacher has at least one day where they have no classes, and it's common to take leave on that day. Mine is Friday. I realize we will move to a full schedule next month, and figured I might as well use some excess leave and applied to take Fridays for the rest of the month off. Later, I was told my leave was denied because it's not nice that you get to have multiple long weekends when your colleagues don't. And I responded with, "So you're saying just because my lesson-free day is on a Friday, I don't get to take leave even though the science teachers can take every Tuesday off, language teachers take every Thursday, and so on?" He kind of waffled around that it doesn't look good, and that I still have to consider a homeroom lesson I have Fridays, which is a student-led activity time. I'm actually not supposed to do anything or intervene, just be present while students handle everything that someone else will have to cover. I've always gotten my own covers before applying for leave, so HR has never even had to do anything. Anyway, I told him straight up that I don't mind if they want to deny my leave, but to remember that I'm there because I want to be, not because I need to be. I told him, okay, but just so you know, it was a courtesy on my end to use my leave on days with the least impact. So you're essentially telling me you'd rather me take leave on days I miss actual classes, which I have no qualms doing. He kind of mumbled something, and then I thanked him and left. So that Friday I came in, and then the following Monday I called in sick and missed my class. I have about 20 leave days to use over the next 7-ish months, not counting school holidays, that make up the final year of my contract here, and I plan to use all of them. I've also told them on a separate occasion that there's literally no downside to me whether or not they approve or deny my leave requests, because 80% of the leave I've taken in the past 2 years has been unpaid, because I don't care about the money. Once, they denied a 3-day unpaid leave request, and I told a colleague, I can just not show up. What are they gonna do, not pay me? That's literally what I asked for in the first place, so either way, I get what I want. They need me more than I need them, as the sole teacher of the most popular elective subject in the school. It's somewhat niche, so it's not easy to just find a replacement. Not to mention, I have both qualifications and experience in my subject's industry, so any replacement they do find is probably not going to be as good. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Jules Deathwish. It says, most managers don't know how to effectively deal with employees who aren't motivated through fear. The threat of losing employment is such a standard tactic that they've forgotten that others exist. OP responded and said, honestly, so true. They're learning it a lot because of the number of single teachers here who aren't completely dependent on their job. The ones who never kick up a fuss tend to have families to support. Just this morning, another announcement was made that they forgot we actually have work scheduled on the Sunday following spring break. Half of us won't even be in the country and booked flights months ago. One colleague, whose contract ends next Tuesday, has pestered 3 of the 4 leadership team members about us now being forced to use our leave on a day we assumed was off, despite the principal literally saying, if you come in, there's no work to do. I know another 2 colleagues who are upset with this news too, considering they will be working 9 days straight prior to spring break, which they're now being told is cut 1 day shorter. This was a great story, but we need to remember that OP comes from a privileged background. They even mentioned that in another comment down below. They have enough of a financial backing that they don't need to work, so they're not worried about being fired or having time off where they're not paid. This does not apply to the majority of people probably listening to this right now. I'm willing to bet a good portion of the people listening to this are in a job where the bosses push them around, but they just take it because they need the paycheck. And another good job is pretty hard to find. This story comes to us from Just Having a Mooch. It's rude to whisper. Hi all, I've been reading this subreddit for a while now, but never really thought I had anything to share. However, I've just remembered a little story from when I was a kid and thought it belonged here. Let me know if it doesn't. The context. I have an aunt, I'll call her Susan for the sake of this post, and she has a son who I'll call John. John is very similar age to me, so I would spend a lot of time with John when I was little, and he would spend a lot of time at my parents' house. Susan wasn't married to John's father, let's call him Harry, but they were in a relationship at the time. It wasn't a great relationship though. All of that is relevant, I think, so with that sorted, let's move on to the story. This story takes place on a day that Susan had been arguing with Harry. They lived together at the time, and she'd left the house to get away from him. She decided to come round to visit my mom to vent, and I was home as well. While Susan and my mom were talking, the doorbell went. Harry had turned up with John, and they were both outside. Susan quickly ran upstairs to avoid seeing him, and I was told not to let Harry know she was there. I'm guessing Harry was over because he wanted to know if my mom had heard from Susan, or wanted to drop John off so he could go look for her. I don't really know. I was pretty young at the time, and that wasn't what I was thinking about. What I was thinking was that I needed clarification on the rule that I'd just been given. You can probably see where this is going. My mom answered the door and started to speak to Harry. Meanwhile, I started tugging at her, trying to get my mom's attention to be able to ask her a question in private. After a little while, with me trying to find a way of whispering to my mom, she eventually says in frustration, "OP, it's rude to whisper. Anything you want to say, you can say out loud." At this point, there's nothing I can do except ask in the raised voice of a child who has been told to speak up. "I know I'm not allowed to tell Harry, but can I tell John his mom's upstairs?" Cue a stunned silence in which my mortified mother mentally processes what just happened and comes to terms with the fact she couldn't even tell me off for doing exactly what she said. Harry, bless him, tried to pretend he hadn't heard anything, even if it was painfully obvious that he must have heard, and left shortly after. John stayed and saw Susan. Susan later went back home, and I'm guessing she argued with Harry some more. They really weren't great for each other. And as for my mom, I don't think she ever really lived it down. I think she still catches her breath when she remembers how awkward that moment was. And she never told me not to whisper again. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Shrojo18. It says, "What I'm surprised about is that when Harry clearly found out his partner was there, he showed enough respect to not act upon it there." OP responded to this one and said, "Harry was classy in a lot of ways. I started to type some out, but it got long, so I deleted it. But he truly was a great guy a lot of the time. He was probably the better half of that relationship in many ways." Susan? Ugh. I don't really like Susan. She's been a pain since before Harry, according to my parents. My dad grew up with her, and my mom has been dating my dad and watching Susan argue with their family since before Harry. Susan would never have shown that level of class. She'd have stormed upstairs without asking if she could come in. Kids are kids, and sometimes they do dumb things. This situation just turned out really well for everybody though. Harry showed that he was a class character and left them alone anyway. He knew she needed time to herself, accepted that, and moved on. This one reminded me of my own children, where I can't have a secret with one of them because it'll either accidentally come out or purposely be told to the other two kids here. Did you know every single KCC video is also produced in podcast form? You can search for Karma Comment Chameleon on every major podcasting platform. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.